Amen. Y'all can go ahead and be seated. It's good to see everybody here this morning. It's a nice sunny day. So it is very, very bright. Being married to sunshine, the sun is always shining. I don't even think she's in here to hear that. So you have to roll back the tape. So anyways, just want to say hello to those of you visiting. My name is Bill, the pastor here, and if you're visiting with us, again, I want to say hello. We have a connections table right out the front. Be sure to go by the connections table. Sunshine will be out there, and just love an opportunity to meet you, and we have a gift for you and hope that you enjoy this service this morning. Again, I want to say hello to those of you watching online and pray and hope that you feel comfortable right where you're at, whenever you're at, watching this video. So, today's Mother's Day, and I just wanted to give a shout out and say hello to all the moms here, and just say thank you so much. I think moms are amazing people. My mom, I think I've said this here before. She taught me how to throw a baseball when I was, obviously went real far with that. But she remember her, teaching me to throw a baseball. I remember when I did swim team, like she was real involved in it, and we had the timers or whatever. She's always like right up there timing people. And I remember one time, this one meet, it was at night, and these two guys showed up, and they were AAU swimmers or something like that. They were like really good swimmers, and they weren't a part of our team, but they just showed up because they saw a swim meet. So she got them on our team that night. I'm not really sure how that happened, but they swam for us. But she went skydiving when she was 70 years old. For her birthday, for 70 years old, she's going skydiving. So she's a ball of energy. So, but very thankful for her and thankful for my wife, Sunshine, even though she's still not in here right now. But I'm like laying them out. Like there she is. Hey, how you doing, Sunshine? Yeah. She's like, what did I just walk into? So, a number of years ago when I was in elementary school, I think I was in 3rd or 4th grade. It was in the summer. My family took a trip with a bunch of other families from our church to Glorieta, New Mexico. Anybody ever been to Glorieta, New Mexico? So it's like this family camp. Maybe we should do that sometime. But it's like they got youth camps up there, but they have it's glorious. So no pun intended. But they have these like family camp and stuff up there. So a bunch of families, we all went together and we drove up. We made the road trip up to Glorieta, New Mexico. And I remember more than anything the ride up there. Because I was in this van. In the van, there was a TV and a VCR. And I thought it was just the coolest thing. We watched Rocky 1, Rocky 2, like multiple times on the way to New Mexico. I think the Terry Fox story, that guy that lost his leg and ran for cancer or whatever. But that was it was a very memorable time. Matter of fact, my dad said that one of the guys on the trip had videotaped everything on the trip. And so we had like a party afterwards at their house. None of the kids, but the adults went over there to kind of see the video. And the guy had left the video camera on the floor when the camera was on the floorboard of this whatever vehicle he was driving. So the whole videotape was the floorboard of the car. And he had all these people over to come watch. He hadn't watched it yet, apparently. So so be sure your camera's not on, doing that. Anyways, but we were up there, and one of the nights, my sister, a couple years older than I, so she might have been in 5th, 6th grade, her group went out to camp out that night, like kind of in the mountain area, and I guess there's counselors out there and stuff, and so we stayed back in our room, but my sister was out with a bunch of other kids her age and older to sleep in a tent out there at night. I'm not really sure why, but that's what they did. So apparently in the middle of the night, someone wanted to play a joke on everybody, and so they decided to dress up as a bear. Now, they didn't not like a kid's like literally like a bear, like they're inside of a stuffed animal type thing, right? So this guy is walking throughout the campsite as a bear in the middle of the night, and he goes up to this one tent, and he's like, I don't know, "Roar," whatever he did. That was impactful for y'all. Anyways, I'm sure it's louder than that, but he just makes this noise, and one of the kids inside the tent freaks out and jumps up, and there's a bear. I don't know what you would do. I don't know if you ever had this happen before. Well, if there's a bear at the foot of your tent and he's growling, and so he gets up and he runs, but he doesn't run to the door of the tent. He doesn't know where he's running. He just runs, and he runs to the back of the tent. The whole tent just falls over and rolls down the mountain. Okay. Crazy. Bear freaked out. He survived. Everybody was okay, but it was just a crazy incident, that happened. I'm not sure what happened to the guy who wanted to scare people as a bear. I'm sure he probably never did that again. Probably scared him more than anything. But look, when you're in a frightful situation, like, what do, right? I mean, are you a runner? I mean, and maybe the question is, if you run, like, where do you run? Or who do you run to, right? So he ran, good. I mean, I don't know what the playbook is when you're faced with a bear like that, if you just freeze like your dad or something. But he ran, right? And so a question for us this morning is, when life kind of challenges you and you're in a situation where you're afraid, or you're in a situation where you're disappointed, you're in a situation where you're hurt, or where you're in a situation where you feel rejected, where do you run? And who do you run to? Today, we're going to take a look and see reasons why you and I need to run to God, not away from God in those moments. And I don't know about you, but sometimes when life comes at us and it throws a curveball and there's experiences in our life and it's painful and it's hurtful, sometimes we project that God's the reason why. We say, listen, I'm not going to run to God because He let this happen. And if He let this happen, why do I want to run to God? I'm mad at God. I'm upset with God. You ever been there before, right? And so sometimes these situations happen, and we feel like that God is the reason why. And it's like, if He's allowing this to happen, if He did it, I'm not going to run to Him. I'm just going to run away from Him. And let me tell you something. We're going to see a story this morning of a woman that is broken, that is hurting, and is in pain, and is 100% because of God. It is because of God. And we're going to see her run. But she don't run away from God. She runs to God. This morning, where are you running? You running away from God, or are you running to God, from God? I'm sure all of us have stories of times we ran away. Maybe not physically, but maybe just in our heart, emotionally, mentally, whatever. We checked out, ran away from God. And maybe like that kid going down the mountain, we experienced some tumbling. We experienced some stuff in our life as a result of running the wrong way, right? Listen, why do we need to run to God? Why do we need to run to God in the moments in our life when it gets hard, when it gets difficult, and we're experiencing a painful situation? This morning, again, we're going to see the reasons why we need to run to God. Let me give you a little context before we jump into this story, because we're seeing a woman, again, who's broken, who's in despair, and her life kind of reflects the nation that she lives in, Israel, this time. But we're going to see, as everybody else around her is running away from God, but she actually runs to God. And we're going to see an incredible thing as God begins to work in her life and works through her life, that God does something amazing. And God wants to do something amazing in her life. God wants to do something amazing through our life. So this story picks up, when we look at the beginning of this story, it picks up basically right at the tail end of the book of Judges. And so if you're familiar at all with the book of Judges, God's people, Israel, His chosen people, He delivered them out of Egypt, out of slavery. They're in a desert for a long time, and God fed them, provided for them, all these miracles that He did in the desert. He gets them into the promised land. They drive out these people. This is the land that God gave them. Everything's great. But what happens is when in the promised land, they start looking at these other cultures, these other people, and they start worshiping the other gods. And God's like, I don't want you to do that, right? You don't need to be worshiping other gods. So as soon as they start worshiping other gods, eventually they find themselves oppressed and underneath the rule of these people, of the God that they're worshiping. And so years go by, they're under oppression, and they cry out to God. Say, God, will you deliver us? God, will you save us? And so God, He raises up a judge in His mercy and His grace. He raises up a judge, and that judge delivers them from the oppression of those people. They experience freedom. They experience peace. Everything's great. Then some time goes on by, and once again, they start getting influenced by another people and their God, and they start worshiping this God. And so as a result, they find themselves underneath the oppression of those people because they're worshiping their God. They cry out to God. God raises up a judge. God delivers them. They experience freedom. And the cycle just goes on and on and on, right? I think it's like 7 different times it happens, like decade after decade after decade. I mean, I don't know if I'm hitting too close to home with anybody here this morning, but it's like this cycle that's going on, right? And so now at this particular time, Israel, God's people, they have lost all moral fabric. I mean, they have no moral compass anymore. They literally have lost their conscience. If you read the very end of the book of Judges, I mean, just horrific things are going on. These people, debauchery, I mean, all this stuff, you're like, what in the world has happened? Like, where is God in this moment? I mean, these people, it's just, and in the book of Judges ends with like all this stuff going on, like, what is going on, right? And so here's a nation that has run away from God. Here's a nation that's in despair, that's in turmoil. But in the midst of that time period, in the midst of this time, God brings hope. There's a woman that decides, I'm not going to run away from God. There's a woman that has faith, and she runs to God. And as she runs to God, God gives hope. God reveals that he's still at work, that he's at work even though all this stuff is going on, that he has a purpose and he has a plan. And even though stuff happens in our life, and we question sometimes what's going on, that God has a purpose and that God has a plan. Again, her brokenness, her despair is somewhat of a reflection of the nation of Israel. So now we pick up this story as a nation that's crumbling, a nation that has lost all moral compass, that it doesn't have a conscience anymore. I mean, horrible stuff's going on. But this woman ends up becoming a change agent, and it has to do with her own brokenness and her own despair. Where do you run when life hits you? Do you run away from God or to God? Listen, the first reason why we need to run to God is this, is that God uses our personal pain in troubling people for his purpose. That's not a misprint, okay? God uses our personal pain in troubling people for his purpose. Let's see how this works out, okay? 1 Samuel chapter 1. I'm going to read a little bit of verses. We're going to go through it and talk about it. But this first reason God uses our personal pain in troubling people for his purposes. Verse 1. There was a certain man named Ramathaim Zophim of the hill country of Ephraim, whose name was Elkanah, the son of Jeroham, son of Elihu, son of Tohu, son of Zoph, an Ephrathite. He had 2 wives. The name of one was Hannah, and the name of the other was Peninnah. And Peninnah had children, but Hannah had no children. Kind of sounds like this little piggy stayed home. This little piggy had none. Sorry, I swear my mind works sometimes. But now, listen, Elkanah's got two wives. You're like, well, what's going on here? Now, he names Hannah. Hannah is named as the first wife. And then you have Peninnah. So what happens is Hannah can have no children. This is a big deal in this culture. Elkanah's got to pass on his lineage, his legacy, inheritance, all this kind of stuff, and he's got to have children to do that, and his wife, Hannah, can't bear him any children. She's barren. She can't have any children. So he gets someone else, and this was common. They have someone else, and she's going to bear him children. So this is his second wife. Now, and her actual name means fertile, and she's fertile. She lives up to her name. And so we're going to see she's got a lot of kids and has provided a lot of kids to her. Hannah's name means grace. Okay? So you got grace and you got fertile here. And you can imagine all kinds of problems are fixing to happen between these two women going on. Let's check it out in verse 3. Now this man used to go up year by year from his city to worship, that's Elkanah, and to sacrifice to the Lord of hosts at Shiloh, where the 2 sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, were priests of the Lord. On the day when Elkanah sacrificed, he would give portions to Peninnah, his wife, and to all her sons and daughters. But to Hannah he gave a double portion because he loved her, though the Lord had closed her womb. Listen. First of all, you and I see in here, picture here of Elkanah is faithful. He's bringing his family to church, right? They're coming to worship God. And what is happening this time, this is not a sin offering. This is more probably a fellowship offering. And what's happening is they're giving, they're sacrificing part of the meat to God, and the other portion of it, some of it goes to the priest and some of it goes to them. And they stay there around the area where they sacrifice, and they eat, and they have fellowship with God. Right? So this is an opportunity for them to fellowship with God. They're sacrificing, they're being grateful, they're thankful. This is the time where they're drawing near to God, they're fellowshipping with Him, right? So the whole family's involved. This is a big deal, right? This is a especially big deal for Israel when they come together with these fellowship offerings. Now it says that Elkanah loves Hannah because he gave her a double portion, right? So he knows the pain that she's experiencing. She knows that all the kids are there, right? The rivals' kids are there. All these other kids, we don't know, I don't know how many, but she's got there's multiple kids there. And then Hannah's just sitting there, and she's sitting there with her husband and this other woman who's able to give birth to her husband's kids, and they're all there, and she's sitting there, and she's got no kids. You got to imagine the pain that she was probably experiencing in that moment. Now, what's interesting is the last verse we just read is because it says that God closed her womb. Now that's not a misprint either. So, you may say, well, she was barren, but God intervened, but it's clear in here that God wants us to know that He is the one responsible for her womb to be closed. Let me tell you something. We all want to talk about God's sovereignty. God's in control. God's in charge. But as soon as He starts messing with us like that, no. God's not going to do that. Why would He do that? Listen, I'm not saying that God's the source of and the reason why that we experience some of the things that we do. But let me tell you something. God is sovereign, and God does what He wishes and what He wills. And it's very clear to her here that the reason why she's barren is because God did it. You think, what kind of a cruel God would do that? Especially knowing that if you know anything about the story is that God called them to multiply. God called them to be fruitful. Like they're supposed to bear children. I mean, this is something that's the favor of God. Her name's Grace. Where's the grace of God, right? I mean, why is God not blessing her? She seems to be faithful. Elkanah, he's a faithful guy. Why is God holding this back from her? Why is God not allowing her to have kids? Listen, this is a huge disappointment for her. But again, it's so perplexing, especially that God has caused this to happen, that children are a blessing from the Lord, but she doesn't have any. But here's the thing we have to realize is if God closed her womb, that means that there is no other way for it to open. No medical attention, no diet, nothing that she could do, nothing that no one could do to change the situation. Because this was a natural thing that happened, but it was from a supernatural source. The only thing that was going to change it was something supernatural. And there are times in our life that there are things going on in our life that there's only something supernatural that can do it. That only God can fix and only God can change. I mean, you ever encountered problems in your life where you're trying to change everything, trying to change habits, medicine, you're pouring all kinds of money to fix things, and nothing's happening. You're like, I don't understand. You just keep hitting a dead-end road. Nothing was going to change Hannah's situation because it was God who did it. God closed her womb. Why would He do that? Why would He do that? Seems like so unfair. But listen, as we're going to see, is that God has a reason, God has a purpose in what He's doing. Listen, this changes our story. When you and I can see our story in the middle of God's story, it changes us. It changes everything. Listen, God has a purpose in mind. Because as we're going to see as the story goes on, some of you are already familiar with it, and we're going to see the story goes on, that God had a reason, God had something in store much, much greater than just having kids. So Elkanah's other wife, rival, her name means trouble, by the way. Okay? So Mrs. Trouble is making it hurt a little bit more. Verse 6. So not only does Hannah have personal pain, but she's got a troublemaker in her life. Verse 6. And her rival used to provoke her grievously to irritate her because the Lord had closed her womb. Wow. You ever been around a troublemaker like that? You ever been a troublemaker? I mean, listen, this is not accidental. This is intentional. This isn't like, oops, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say that. She's very calculated. She's very intentional. She's trying to shove little jabs at her on a continuous basis. She knows where she's hurt, right? And so she's just trying to just bring the pain into her face. And you ever been around people like that and you're just like, you know what? I'm fixing to go off on this person. Like God, the justice of God is coming. I'm just telling you. God works through me. He's going to work in me. He's going to work through me, and we're bringing justice, right? I don't know, you ever been this way where there's somebody giving you trouble and you just run away? You not knowing that God has got that person in your life because He's doing something in you? You see, God's going to use not just personal pain, but He's going to use a troublemaker in your life. Someone that you got to see every day. Someone that you got to go to work with. Someone you got to live with. And we want that person to get away. And God said, no, they're here for a reason. And what we're going to see is that God is using this evil for good. Is using the troublemaker for good in her life. I mean, you would think she would be happy, right? She's got a bunch of kids. Why did she just give? Why doesn't she just give to Hannah? Like, hey, let's pray. I'm going to pray for you. You want to watch the kids. Maybe they call you mom or something. I don't know what the deal is. But the reason why is because Elkanah loved Hannah more than her. Listen, jealousy will make you do some crazy things. She doesn't have the affection of her husband. She doesn't have the love for her. She knows that it's elsewhere. And she's in pain. Listen, hurt people hurt people. Hurt people hurt people. If someone's hurting you, I promise you that person's hurt. In some way, another, somewhere in their life, they've got hurt. Because hurt people hurt people. So she's hurt, so she's just passing on. She's sharing it with Hannah. Let's look in verse 7. So it went on year by year. This isn't just a one-time thing. This is like year by year. This is going on. As often as she went up to the house of the Lord, she used to provoke her. Therefore, Hannah wept and would not eat. And so, again, God is using this woman to bring Hannah to brokenness. Like she is now just weeping and she won't even eat. Now listen, the fellowship offering, this offering that they're getting, again, they're offering it to God. Some of the priests get some of it. They get some of it. It's like picture you're just eating in a restaurant, okay? You're there eating with your family. You're fellowshipping with God. And Hannah does not even want to eat any of it. You ever been there before? You ever been there where you're like, you're at a point where you're like, I can't even eat. But listen, why are they eating? To fellowship with God. You ever been in a place where you're like, I don't want to go to church today? Are you at church? Maybe you're here this morning, you're like, I don't want to be here. There's no joy. There's no reason. Right? It doesn't necessarily say that Hannah was mad at God, but like she can't even just participate in the joy of the Lord in this moment when they're fellowshipping with God. Pain will do that. People will do that in your life. Sometimes God is using pain and using people in our life to draw us to Him, but what happens is we often run away from Him. I can't tell you how many times I've seen it in my life where people get upset with somebody at church and they're gone. They're out. And we have churches filled with people that have just moved from one place to the next because of relationships. Just going to run away. Listen, God doesn't want us to run away. He wants us to run to Him. Listen, God is going to use all this in Hannah's life to a place of brokenness. There may be somebody in your life who's like a thorn in your flesh right now. God could have that person there for a reason because He's trying to do something in you and through you. Let's look at in verse 8. Hannah's got a reason to run away, but she doesn't. Look at verse 8. And Elkanah, her husband, said to her, Hannah, why do you weep, and why do you not eat? And why is your heart sad? Am I not more to you than 10 sons? You got to love Elkanah. Am I not enough? I mean, come on, babe. I mean, no children's going to do it. You got me, right? I'm giving you double portions. Everything's good. But hear me out on this. This is why the second reason why you and I need to run to God is because of this, is that God uses people to meet needs, but some needs only God Himself can meet. Some needs only God Himself can meet. And listen, there are times that you might be experiencing things in your life that your spouse cannot meet. Your husband or your wife can't do it. And what happens a lot of times is we project, we make it that their fault, and we make it that they're supposed to fix it. And listen, Elkanah, as good as a guy is, he can't do nothing about it. God uses people, God uses our spouse in tremendous ways to come alongside us, to encourage us. But listen, there are times when it's only God is only going to be the one who's going to be able to do something in your life. Only God is going to be able to heal you. Only God is going to be able to restore you. Only God is going to give you fresh eyes to see something. Elkanah is not enough for Hannah. So we run to God because He uses our pain and people to bring His purposes, and because some needs can only be met with God. This is the last point. We're going to break this out a little bit. But we also run to God because God works in and through our prayers for His purposes. He works in and through our prayers for His purposes. Look at verse 9. And after they had eaten and drunk in Shiloh, Hannah rose. Now Eli the priest was sitting on the seat beside the doorpost of the temple of the Lord. She was deeply distressed and prayed to the Lord and wept bitterly. Now in other translations, it says one time, like once after they ate. It's not in the original language, but they put that in another translation because what's indicated is they've been doing this multiple times, but this one time after they ate, she goes up and goes to the temple. You ever had those? Like it's been one thing after another, but this one time I decided to do this. This one time I decided to go to God. This one time I decided to pray. You ever have those onces in your life? Those one times? It may be today. But those decisions that are they change everything. They start a turnaround. Those moments in your life where you're like, man, I've been doing this and this, but this one time I've been drinking, but this one time I said no. I've been watching this. One time I said no. I've been stealing, I've been cheating, I've been whatever it is, but this one time I said no. This one time I did this. And then sometimes it's that one time that makes all the difference. And in this one time, years after years she do it, but this one time she goes, I'm going to God. I'm going to God. The power of a moment, the power of a decision. Maybe you're in a moment of decision. And it's like, I know how I feel, but this time I'm going to God. We have no idea what's hanging in the balance as she runs to God in this moment. And she brings it. It says she's deeply distressed, prayed, and she prayed, the Lord wept bitterly. Listen, I want to look at a couple things about her prayer here. Is the first thing that she has an authentic prayer. It's an authentic prayer. Look at verse 10. She was deeply distressed and prayed to the Lord and wept bitterly. She vowed a vow and said, O Lord of hosts, if you will indeed look on the affliction of your servant and remember me and not forget your servant. Listen, she's so authentic in there in that prayer. She's bringing her hurt, she's bringing her pain, and she's being real with God in that moment. And she's like, listen, look at my affliction. Can't you see where I'm at? You ever had a prayer like that? Where like, God, can't you see where I'm at? I've had so many prayers like that. I feel like I've been all over the city with prayers like that. I mean, God, don't you see right now? Don't you see the pain that I'm in? Where are you right now, God? I'm hurting. You see the Psalms. I love the Psalms. David, a man after God's own heart, he was so real and he was so authentic with God. He wasn't just throwing up these professional prayers. He was like, God, where are you? I'm hurting and I'm in pain. And she knows that God knows, but she's like, listen, I'm hurting. And she's bringing all that she has to God and she's talking to God about it. It's an authentic prayer. Authentic prayer is powerful. You know, I don't know about you, when I first started following Christ, I was kind of like, I thought I had to pray it's like a certain way. And there are certainly, things you can do to help you pray, because if your mind wanders, you got ADD during prayer or something. But man, just talking to God about how you think and how you feel. Because God wants to know us. God wants to know our heart. He knows it, but He wants that intimacy with us. And it's when you and I are to be vulnerable and you and I to be authentic and to be open that God can begin to change us and to work in us. But listen, you see in here, she's not hiding her pain. She's coming. She's not acting like she's some spiritual. Well, she actually is very spiritual, but she's not acting like she's some seminary, know all the answers. She's just coming real and raw with God. That's an authentic prayer. The next thing you see in here is it's an honoring prayer. It's an honoring prayer. Look at verse 11. And she vowed a vow and said, O Lord of hosts, if you will indeed look on the affliction of your servant and remember me and not forget your servant, but will give to your servant a son, then I will give to him to the Lord all the days of his life, and no razor shall touch his head. Listen, O Lord of hosts, what she approaches God and she said, O Lord of hosts. Listen, she's hurting, she's in pain, but she addresses God as O Lord of hosts. It's the first time in Scripture that anybody's ever recorded in prayer as of addressing God as the Lord of hosts. This woman in pain and despair and brokenness is the first one we see in Scripture address God as the Lord of hosts. Listen, she knows that this is the Lord of armies, right? She knows that how powerful he is and how great he is. And you can see that she calls herself his servant. She's like, I know that I'm a servant of you. This is an honoring prayer. She understood her position with God. She understood who he was and who she was, but that did not stop her from being authentic, did not stop her from being real. But listen, she knew who God was, and that's such a powerful thing when you and I can pray knowing, like, you ever been in a situation where you're like, I need to talk to somebody that I know could do something about it? You know? And so you're like, well, maybe you're talking to somebody and you're like, well, this person's just not doing anything. They can't do anything about it. But then you talk to another person and you're like, this person actually can change what is happening here. So I'm going to talk to them about it, right? You know, and there's confidence that you have in that, right? You're like, you feel confident, you feel good, like, well, I'm actually talking to a person that cares about me and actually can do something about it. Listen, that's how we should feel when we talk to God. He can do anything. Like, there's no one else that can do what he can do. And she's coming to him recognizing who he is and what he can do. Even though her situation is broken, it's because of him. She still honors God in her prayer. So we see this as an authentic prayer, it's an honoring prayer, and we also see this, it's a sacrificial prayer. It's a sacrificial prayer. Look at verse 11. And she vowed a vow and said, O Lord of hosts, if you will indeed look on the affliction of your servant, remember me, and not forget your servant, but will give to your servant a son, then I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life, and no razor shall touch his head. Now listen, when you read this, you're like, she's cutting a deal with God. You give me this, I'll give you that. Right? You ever done that before? You don't have to raise your hand. But you ever cut a deal with God? You know, if you just do this thing for me one time, right? You know, if you just do this for me, right? Now, again, it appears that she's kind of making a deal with God, but when you actually stop and understand what's happening here, it's something even deeper than that. You see, Elkanah was a Levite. He's from the priestly line. Okay? That's the group of people, the line that God had chose to be priest for him. So if she's going to have a son, that son is going to be in the priest, is going to be a Levite. He's going to be in the priesthood. So her son's already going to be committed to the Lord. He's already going to belong to God. Number one, he's going to belong to God because this is a Jewish nation and all the children belong to God. So he's already going to belong to God. But in particular, if he's going to become a priest from your age, I think it's 30 to 50, where they have this time of service where it's dedicated to serving God from 30 to 50. Right? And so this is what being born into as a Levite is. You become a priest, right? So, but what she's saying, she knows that, but she's offering even a greater commitment than that. A deeper commitment she's offering to God. A greater sacrifice. Because she says, she will give him to the Lord all the days of his life, not just when he's 30, all the days of his life, and no razor will touch his head. What's that about? What is that about, right? So if you're familiar with all, this is a Nazirite vow, which is in Numbers 6, and this is a voluntary vow that God told Israel they could take if they wanted to, be set apart and be committed to him for a certain time period. Here's 3 things about that vow. They can't drink wine. Okay? Like, what's the big deal? Well, grapevines were a big deal. Okay? I mean, if you're not going to drink wine, it's going to be pretty clear, pretty obvious that you're not drinking wine. You can't touch a dead body, and you can't cut your hair. All these are visible expressions and signs of an inward commitment to God. So what she's telling God, she's like, listen, I will commit this child to you for his whole life. I'm going to give him to you for his whole life. I'm going to raise him in a way that he belongs to you from the day I have him until the day I don't have him anymore. And listen, this is a sacrifice on her part. Parents, come on, you understand. If she's going to raise him this way, listen, it's going to require her to sacrifice. Because she's got to make decisions around making sure that her son is set apart and her son belongs to the Lord. And that he's in culture, but he's not with culture. Are you feeling me a little bit? Listen, this is a sacrifice on her part. Not unless she's doing something that's given to him. It's going to require her to sacrifice and to give her child to God. Listen, the safest place you and I can have our kids is in the hands of God. It's the safest place. It's hard to let go of your kids. I mean, when I was a kid, I was gone all day long, Of course, you're like, well, that explains a lot. But, I was, out at the golf course, like literally in the summer, I was there the whole entire day, and I come home, no cell phones, a phone at the country club, I'd call my parents or whatever. And, but I was gone on the bikes, I literally leave like 7 in the morning, go to swim team practice, go play golf all day, go play tennis, go to the country club, and I come home about 8:30 at night. Every day, did that summertime. I didn't talk to my parents. I got in a little bit of trouble at the country club, but not that bad. But I was like going. Nowadays it's like I can't imagine my kids riding their bike up to the convenience store up front. It's just like you're like wow, times are different. But listen, this isn't about like letting your child do whatever. But it's like God, I'm gonna place my child. I'm giving him to you. He's yours. And I'm going to be responsible for what God's called me to do, but I can't be responsible for all of their decisions because they have their will. They're going to make their own decisions. I'm responsible for them. I'm going to lead them and guide them, but ultimately they are going to make their own decisions. But I'm going to do everything I can underneath God's authority and God's power to lead them to live a godly life, to know God. That's what she's saying. See, God, He's yours. See, God was using all of her pain. He was using the troublemaker. He was using her personal pain to get her to this point, to get her to a deeper commitment. And it may be that the pain that we're experiencing, maybe even today or at some other time, is that God's trying to get you and I to get to a deeper place with Him, to get to a deeper commitment. God, I wanted this to happen because of this, but now I want this to happen just whatever it is for your glory, God, whatever it is. See, God uses pain and people in our life to bring us to places of prayer, to places of dependency. And she has gotten to a place of being dependent on God. Listen, this is a sacrificial prayer. So we have an authentic prayer. We have an honoring prayer. We have a sacrificial prayer. And here's this last one, is it is a fervent prayer. It is a fervent prayer. Let's look in verse 12. As she continued praying for the Lord, Eli observed her mouth. Hannah was speaking in her heart, only her lips moved, and her voice was not heard. Therefore, Eli took her to be a drunken woman. Now, you're trying to like, what is this about? Again, if you understand the situation in this nation at this time, it's because people are drinking. And he's like, oh, we got another one up here, another drunk one. Go home, sleep it off, come back up here later, right? So he's like, obviously this woman's drunk. I don't know if you've ever seen somebody praying as fervent as she was, and their mouth is moving, but they're not saying any words. He's like, she's drunk. So that's kind of what's going on here. In verse 14, and Eli said to her, how long will you go on being drunk? Put your wine away from you. But Hannah answered, no, my Lord, I am a woman troubled in spirit. I have drunk neither wine nor strong drink, but I have been pouring out my soul before the Lord. Do not regard your servant as worthless woman. For all along I have been speaking out of my great anxiety and vexation. Man, she's pouring out her soul before the Lord. This isn't a passive prayer. She's. And I don't know if you can pray like this all the time. To be honest, she's just pouring it all out to God. Her anxiety, her vexation. She's at her wits end. But I love how it says that she's praying in her heart. She's not speaking any words. I love this quote from John Bunyan. In prayer, it is better to have a heart without words than words without a heart. what's in the heart. Man, we get so focused on words that we're saying, you know, how eloquent we sound in prayer, you know. I remember, I think it was Charles Swindoll said that a guy who had just became a Christian was in a circle of people praying, and I guess he had some veteran Christians in there, you know, some Hall of Famers or something, and so they were going around the circle, and everybody's praying these great prayers. Nothing wrong with praying a long prayer, okay? But, and he gets to his point, he kind of fumbles over his words or whatever, and one of the ladies, the Hall of Famer in the group, says, hey, you really need to work on your prayer life, because I couldn't understand. Yeah. But how many of you ever been afraid somebody's going to say that about you? I mean, come on. And so she's like, you need to work on your prayer life. You know, I couldn't really understand what you're saying. And he looked at her, new Christian, says, sorry, lady, but I wasn't talking to you. Yeah? No? Listen, this is a fervent prayer. And we need to be praying fervently. We need to be praying with our heart open to God, bringing God our worries, our concerns for the day. I don't know about you, but I you know, this has been convicting to me because I think I try to handle things too much instead of trying to just get on my knees and pray. And it's made me to want to be more of a man of prayer than I currently am. Just bringing everything before God. A fervent prayer. Listen, she wasn't holding anything back, man. We're not supposed to hold anything back with God. This is a fervent, a heartfelt prayer. And listen, verse 17. It says, then Eli answered, go in peace, and the God of Israel grant your petition that you have made to him. Wow. Verse 18, and she said, let your servant find favor in your eyes. And then the woman went her way and ate, and her face was no longer sad. I love it that her face is no longer sad. Because prayer changes us. Prayer changes us. Listen, God might not always give us the answer that we're looking for, but He's always got a purpose, and He's gonna work things out for His glory and for His plans. And prayer will always change us. I remember one time when before we had kids, Sunshine and I she was teaching at Baines, and I remember we were in our marriage, and I was praying, and I was just praying about our marriage. And as I was praying, I just realized that God was like talking to me about what I needed to do. I was like, wow, I don't like this prayer. But listen, God, prayer changes us. He might not always change the situation, but He will change us. So I'm going to read the rest of this passage here. They rose early in the morning and worshiped before the Lord. And then they went back to the house of Ramah. And Elkanah knew Hannah, his wife. That means they slept together. And the Lord remembered her. And in due time, Hannah conceived and bore a son. And she called his name Samuel. For she said, I have asked him from the Lord. The man Elkanah and all his house went up to offer to the Lord the yearly sacrifice and pay his vow. But Hannah did not go. For she said to her husband, as soon as the child is weaned, I will bring him so that he may appear in the presence of the Lord and dwell there forever. Elkanah, her husband, said to her, do what seems best to you. Wait until you have weaned him. Only may the Lord establish his word. So the woman remained and nursed her son until she weaned him. And when she had weaned him, she took him up with her, along with the 3-year-old bull, an ephah of flour, and a skin of wine, and she brought him to the house of the Lord at Shiloh. And the child was young. Then they slaughtered the bull, and they brought the child to Eli. And she said, O my Lord, as you live, my Lord, I am the woman who was standing here in your presence, praying to the Lord. For this child I prayed, and the Lord has granted me my petition that I made to him. Therefore I lent him to the Lord. As long as he lives, he is lent to the Lord. Listen, she carried out her commandment, and she gave him to the Lord. And as you see the story begin to go on, you're going to see this guy Samuel rise up and become one of the most significant people in Israel, and a prophet who he anoints King David, who the Messiah comes in the line of David. This is a turnaround for the nation of Israel. And listen, he turned this woman's situation around because he was using her situation to turn around a nation. You see the purpose that was involved in here? God was wanting to raise someone up because he was doing something. He had a tremendous person, and this changed. This is the beginning of the monarchy for Israel. They had no king. This is the beginning of the monarchy, and this guy's going to grow up to be a great prophet. And her pain and all that she was going through, that God had a reason for it. I don't know why things happen in our life all the time. I don't know why things happen in my life all the time, but I know this, that God causes all things to work for good, that those that love Him. I remember when Sunshine was in the ICU, and people were telling me that, she's going to be okay. She's going to be okay. I said, well, God never told me she was going to be okay. I didn't get a fresh word from God about that. But I knew this. I knew who God was. And I knew that God causes all things for good, that those that love Him. And all I knew is that God was good, and God was going to make it better. And He has made it better. I mean, listen, I don't know what the end is going to be for all of us, but listen, God is a good God, and we can trust Him. And when we're in situations, when we're hurting and we're in pain, we got to run to Him, not away from Him. The enemy wants you to run away from him. The enemy is going to make you think of all kinds of reasons why you shouldn't go to church, why you shouldn't go talk to God, why you shouldn't go to Bible study. The enemy is going to put all these stuff in your mind, all these distractions in your mind to try to keep you away. It's like, do we realize what's happening? All these seemingly good opportunities, but they all push us away. It's like when Paul says, don't let the enemy seduce you from your pure, sincere devotion to Christ. We got to have our eyes open and saying, man, God, I want to run to you. Help me to see where I'm running right now. If I'm running to a bottle, if I'm running to some sort of addiction, if I'm running to another person, whatever it is I'm running to, God, I want to run to you because you're the only one that I know can do anything. This is an amazing story. I don't think Hannah knew all what was going on. I don't think Hannah thought, well, this is going to be awesome because 2024 they're going to be reading this story. I don't think she was thinking about that. But God uses our story to tell His story. And listen, so many of you can share so many stories, and I know some of your stories that I've been encouraged by, that God uses our stories to tell His story, that the world may know Him. Listen, this morning, where are you running, or who are you running to? Are you running to God? Are you running away from God? Listen, we have reasons to run to God this morning, as Hannah has just powerfully we've seen through her life, is God is looking for men and women whose hearts are fully committed to Him, to come to Him. Maybe you can come to Him this morning with something. Maybe something, you need to pray about something in your life, or pray for something in your life. Pray for someone, whatever it may be. Let's just have an opportunity and not just have talked about it and read about it and heard from God about it. Let's actually take this to say, not as an individual, but as a church. As a church, let's run to God. So I'm going to be up here. Quentin and Alicia are going to be up here. And if you just want to come up here and pray, but let's collectively as a church, let's run to God. All the things that we have before us, great ideas, great abilities, great skills, we need to run to God as His people. Let me pray. Lord Jesus, I just love you and I praise you. And Lord, I've run away from you too many times. I thank you that your grace is sufficient. Lord, I pray that this morning that we would take a step towards you, Jesus. That we run to you, Lord. Not away from you, God. Lord, move in our hearts right now, Lord. Break us free, Lord. Heal us where we need healing. God, restore us. God, renew us, Lord Jesus.